There's a lot of debate going on right now about seed oils. Vegetable oil, canola oil, grapeseed oil. Others say they're totally fine and there's nothing to worry about. I just want to know what the healthiest way to cook my food is. And what about raw milk? Things like almond milk, oat milk, or cashew milk actually better than real dairy? Why has raw dairy been demonized, but things like pasteurized milk and low-fat milk products been praised and seen as totally fine? I had to get to the bottom of this. Today's guest is Steven Arena, aka The Really Tan Man. He's the founder of MASA Chips, and he shares the truth of what's really going on in our food system and how he believes that we can change the world by prioritizing our health, our nutrition, the things we're putting in our bodies every day. If you find value in this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Now let's dive into it with the Tan Man. I was just diving deep into your Substack the
Oh
past
wow.
couple of days, diving into it. I love how you've given your Substack like a fantasy of an actual place in
Yeah.
Tanland.
Yeah. The creating the aesthetic world is well, A, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. And B, it adds some sort of like aesthetic cohesion. But the cool thing about like visuals that people don't often like get, at least like explicitly, is that like by doing it visually, it like subconsciously like creates this like philosophical cohesion that's way more compelling. Same thing with Masa too. It's like we don't have to say certain things because you can just see it, and so you like feel it without having to say it, which is important.
Yeah, it's so interesting too. The more I've researched and talked to people in the CPG world, it's like it's not just the actual taste of the product, which MASA chips,
Yeah,
by the way, are just freaking phenomenal. I'm still living at home, so I came home I was gone for 2 days, and I came back. I was like, we had 4 bags of these things, and where are they? My family's
yeah,
just like, yeah, we made nachos with the raw cheese and the fresh salsa. I was like, okay,
yeah,
I can't be mad about that. But it is the feeling of the bag, the aesthetic,
yeah.
the bag, the brand, and all that. So, how long? I'm curious. How long did the process take before you guys had something that was like, okay, this is good. This is something that we can put out there to the world.
Yeah, so the idea for it started in January of last year, so that would be 2022. Like it was during like a New Year's trip. And so we left the New Year's trip, and on the trip was my, soon to be co-founder. And that process of the initial recipe development and then the branding design and all that stuff, that took until July when we sold our first bag. So 7 months about.
Okay, gotcha. And
Yeah.
was there a lot of trial and error, or was it kind of a seamlessly smooth transition?
Honestly, there was no trial and error.
You just hit the nail on the head, and that
It
was it.
happened. Yeah, so the prototype that I made, because okay, I figured out, and I'm sure people listening may be familiar with this, maybe not, but when you want to make food and you want to sell a CPG product, typically you don't make it yourself. You have an idea, maybe you experiment in your kitchen, and then you find some factory to make it, and then you work with them on recipe development, and then they're the ones making it. That was not an option available to us because no one wanted to make our recipe because it's that, avant-garde, so to speak. So we had to do it ourselves. We learned pretty quickly on, I think, like March or something. We were like, okay, we're not going to find someone who can make it for us. So I was like, screw it. If this is going to happen, I'll have to do it myself. So I bought like a turkey fryer from Costco. I bought a box of tallow from some dude on the internet, and I got organic tortillas. And I like during Easter when my family was like cooking their actual holiday food, I was like out in my parents' deck, like with the fryer, trying not to burn the house down with my propane tank and like my boiling tallow like on the table. And so I made the first prototype then, and I threw some salt on them, and I tried them. They were amazing. I had my family try them. They really liked it. And that was like a watershed moment because they're not as health conscious as I am. So the fact that they liked it, like independent of, the nutritional component, they just liked the way that it tasted. That was like, okay, cool. We have something that's like real here. Because one of the problems in health food is that people, like most health foods taste bad and are not enjoyable. It tastes like cardboard. You got chia seeds and kale and all sorts of like, no one wants to eat this crap. So it's like people are averse to it because of the taste and the experience. So the fact that we can combine both, like something that's healthy enough for me, the health freak, to like want to eat, and also tasty enough for the normal people to want to eat. That's like the golden ticket right there. So I had that, and then we just needed to figure out a way to brand it such that we could sell it and like make it popular, because making stuff by hand is obviously not cheap. So you can't just like put any old bag and any old logo and any old design on it, because like no one's going to pay any sort of premium for that. And you're not going to be able to like get this sort of viral sort of marketing out of that. And also, I mean, we need to be able to pay our employees, because like you can't just make tortilla chips. Like even from the very first day, there were 4 people making it. Like it wasn't, it didn't start out with just me. It was like there was me and 4 other people from the very first day that we made it. So in order to pay for all of that, we have to make sure that like we're able to charge like money that allows us to exist. And so that's where we get into the whole concept of the sort of sophisticated, luxury, refined, like leisure, aspirational branding that we are now known for. So that happened. That process probably took a few weeks with our artist, who is so talented. It's funny you mentioned my Substack, because that vibe, the Tanland thing, is basically the Masa thing, like the sun, Mediterranean imagery. That was an existing like aesthetic world, and so we just had to turn that into a package and a logo and colors and fonts and all that stuff, and our artist did a marvelous job. And then once we saw that prototype, like he had a few different designs for us, and none of them hit like the design we currently had. So there was like 4 options. We picked that one, made a few tweaks to like where the letters were going to be, and then that was the bag. It was that was done.
So kind of taking a step back there,
Yeah,
beef tallow.
beef tallow.
Most people are like, what is beef tallow, right? And
Yeah.
until I really started getting into the world of like, what is actual health food and like holistic wellness and all these things, I had no idea what beef tallow was. If you would have said beef tallow, I'd say that sounds disgusting. I don't
Yes.
want anything to do with that. But for some reason, vegetable oil, canola oil, like that sounds just perfectly normal and
Yeah.
fine. So why beef tallow, and what are the benefits of that?
Yeah. Yeah. So tallow, for a few reasons. There's the health reason, which is that, okay, let's think of all the possible oils we could make this in. So you have the vegetable oils, the seed oils, which are what everyone fries their crap in, whether it's French fries at a restaurant or tortilla chips at the grocery store, it's seed oils. So that's off the table simply for, health reasons. Then the only other options are olive oil, coconut oil, or avocado oil, or some kind of animal fat. So olive oil is bad because you shouldn't fry it at high temperatures. Um, Avocado oil is bad because most avocado oil on the market is like fake or rancid. It's fake because it comes from drug cartels who own avocado farms in Mexico, and they like lace avocado oil with like seed oils to like, cut costs. And no one knows, and no one knows about this because, it's not like there's supply chain integrity, in that world. And there was like a pretty interesting study that someone at USC San Diego, I think, um, did, where they bought a bunch of avocado oil from like a grocery store, and 82% of it was like fake, basically. It was either rancid, like it had gone bad, or it was actually fake. So avocado oil out of the question from like a supply chain integrity standpoint. And then coconut oil is no good because it doesn't taste good. Like you don't want your corn chips to taste like coconuts. Like I'm sorry, it's not a thing. So that leaves the animal fats, and tallow is the best animal fat from a nutritional standpoint as well as an accessibility standpoint. There's a lot of beef, a lot of cows in America, so you can get it. But then there's the culinary dimension where like fried foods, like think about the archetypal fried food, like French fries. French fries were invented in Belgium. Belgium has the best fries in the world. I don't know if you've ever been, but if you do, highly recommended. And they fry their fries in beef tallow. Like McDonald's fried their fries in beef tallow up until the 90s. That was how you make good French fries. Like that's, if you go to like a premium restaurant, you'll find tallow fries or duck fat fries, for example. That's like culinarily like the best way to do it. The plant oils, when you fry things, it tends to produce like a greasier feel, which is ironic because you'd think, oh, the animals, like that's greasier. Like, no, it's actually the plant oils. I think it has something to do with the different types of fatty acids in the plant oils that like make it feel like on your fingers it's greasier, and it sits in your stomach. So tallow is, from my perspective, there's really nothing else that you would want to deep fry in. And so, combine all those reasons plus the fact that like Seed oils are completely environmentally destructive. You need pesticides and GMOs and monocropping, and it's horrific. Industrial processing, all that stuff. Whereas tallow comes from cows that are just grazing grass. It's like, the least energy intensive thing you could imagine. Like you don't need electricity to make tallow. You don't need chemicals or a factory to make tallow. You can, if you hunted a deer even or a bison in the wild and like had a campfire, like you could make tallow. So it's incredibly natural, and it's otherwise, a lot of tallow doesn't go to use in modern American cuisine. So it's like a thing that farmers who farm like high quality animals, like that's something that they're not getting paid for, which is a shame, because we want to encourage them, to continue farming and do regenerative agriculture and pasture raised beef and all that stuff. If they can make more money from it by selling tallow that they otherwise wouldn't be able to sell, then that's just a win. So, I mean, on so many levels, like you got the environmental, you got the health, you got the culinary, taste, all those levels, tallow just like reigns supreme.
So seed oils, they're kind of a hot topic. Not kind of, they're an
Sure.
absolutely hot topic right now. You see guys like Paul Saladino, seed oils. Seed oils are the number one cause of obesity and
Mhm.
heart disease, and whole slew of other health problems with
Yeah.
the American population. But then you have other people who make claims that seed oils are actually good for you. More
Heart healthy.
heart healthy, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast this morning just to try to understand, and even at the end of the podcast, I was like, the claims that he was making didn't make any sense. So
Yeah.
why do people try to make the claims for seed oils, and what is the actual detriment they're having on our health?
Sure. Yeah. So they were the first thing to know about seed oils is that they were invented like 100 years ago. Like if I gave you a time machine and you went back 200 years before the Industrial Revolution, you couldn't go anywhere on Earth to get seed oils. Um, they require industrial equipment and solvents and chemicals and chemical engineering to be made, because a seed, like say a sunflower seed, how much oil is in a sunflower seed? It's not like an olive. You just squeeze an olive and oil comes out. Sunflower seeds have a very tiny amount of oil, so you need like hundreds of sunflower seeds and to process in the industrial way to extract a tablespoon of sunflower oil, for example. Maybe it's not 100, maybe it's 50. It's a lot. It's a lot of seeds. So more seeds than you would ever be able to eat in one sitting. And if you process them in this way, you get to extract the oil. That's only possible with like hydraulic presses and like centrifuges and like crazy equipment. So that's why seed oils didn't exist. Um, the original seed oil was cottonseed oil. So the American economy in the late 1800s and early 1900s was very heavily driven on cotton production. And so when you make cotton, you want the fibers to make clothing, of course, but the seeds are useless. They're not edible. No one eats cotton seeds. No animals eat cotton seeds. It's like not food. So you have these industries growing tons of cotton, and they have all these seeds they have to get rid of. So they decided, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could do something that we could sell? And so someone figured out a way to like extract the oils from cotton seeds. And that was, there's a patent filed in like the late 1800s for a device that can do this. But the real thing, the real transition happened in 1924, or 1918 or something, when some guy invented a way to take cottonseed oil, which was liquid, and turned it into a solid fat. So another thing to note is that in American culinary tradition, pretty much all of Western Europe, oils were not used. Like we use oils because you're familiar with cooking oil, people are familiar with olive oil. Like we know about oils nowadays. We didn't even have olive oil widely available in this country until the 1980s. So before that, the only oil you can get was seed oils. But like before that, because I told you they were invented, Americans did not cook with oils, did not cook with liquid oil. If you wanted to cook with something, it's butter, bacon grease, or tallow, like fat, like solid fat. And so when they invented cottonseed oil in like the late 1800s, you couldn't sell that because Americans were not used to buying oil to cook with. So only after they figure out how to hydrogenate it, hydrogenated vegetable oils, like that makes it solid. And so only after they figure out how to solidify cottonseed oil, um, then they could sell it. And this was called Crisco. Crisco was the first
Real
seed oil.
quick too, like
Yeah.
the hydrogenated oils, like hydrogenated things. Could you elaborate a little bit on just like what that is too?
Sure. Okay, cool. So I don't know. So a fatty acid is, the basic molecule of fat, and it's like a long chain of carbons. Each carbon has like sort of two hydrogens on it. And when every carbon has like two hydrogens, it's called a saturated fat. And saturated means that the carbons are all saturated with the most amount of hydrogens possible. That's just the chemistry term. And a saturated fat is solid at room temperature. If there are a few carbons on there without a hydrogen, then there's missing hydrogens. And so we call this unsaturated. Unsaturated fats are liquid at room temperature. So the process of hydrogenation is to take an unsaturated oil that is missing hydrogens and adding hydrogens, hydrogenating to make it saturated. So the terminology all makes sense.
So it's basically just fake saturated fats.
Fake saturated fat. Yeah.
Okay.
So you have cottonseed oil, which is liquid. It's unsaturated. So you hydrogenate it artificially to make it saturated. And then now it's solid at room temperature. And now that's something you can sell to the American like housewives basically in the 1920s. And so that was called Crisco. That was like the first one. And everyone knows about Crisco. People don't really cook with it anymore, but like, that was a big deal. So that was invented in 1924. And because people needed to like convince, the industry needed to convince Americans to buy it. There's this whole crazy thing that happened with the American Heart Association where Procter and Gamble, the company that invented Crisco and owns Crisco to this day, they paid off the American Heart Association basically to say that this was good. Like the American Heart Association was like a not very widely known like ragtag ensemble of like doctors. Like no one knew about it. It wasn't a big deal. But they got the equivalent of like $20 million in 1924 money from Procter and Gamble to like go and start promoting that like, these types of oils were good. And then eventually that just turned into from Crisco, it just turned into the actual oils themselves. They stopped hydrogenating them. And that's when you get the Wesson oil, which is like this is the 1950s. Wesson oil, Mazola, corn oil, like all these cooking oils. And then there was a whole bunch of marketing that happened in the 1950s. And then, this is also when the cholesterol is bad, saturated fat bad, all that propaganda that like the modern holistic health people have known about is wrong for like decades at this point. All of that started in the 1950s. And then by, the 1970s, it was considered gospel in America that like seed oils, which were called vegetable oils, unsaturated fats, like that was healthy. And that saturated fats, bacon grease, animal fat, that was bad. That was like, the mainstream nutritional opinion and continues to this day. So nowadays, you'll still find people who are educated by the nutritional academies and nutrition institutes that are still funded by these sort of companies. Those people will still be the ones to tell you that unsaturated fats are good and that saturated fats are bad. But it's just all a bunch of bad science and like, corporate propaganda that was very effective, obviously. But yeah, I think the punchline like to really get here is that all this food is inherently, completely, 100% and totally artificial. It's not inherent to our diet. It's not traditional to our diet. If you buy the very obvious premise that like any organism should eat like what it historically has evolved to eat, that just seems pretty obviously true. If you buy that, then seed oils, vegetable oils, they are inherently antithetical to that way of eating.
So why is there still this notion too that saturated fats are bad, unsaturated fats are good? And, why has that reigned true in like the health world? Because you talk to so many people today, red meat's bad, saturated fats are bad, which obviously the quality of the meat matters, but why is that still?
I mean, money is effective. Marketing works. Like that's basically it. Like cultural programming, like food especially. Like if you think about like go to social studies class in middle school or high school, like what is culture? Culture is a language, there's ethnicity, there's clothing, and it's food. Food is one of the most fundamental aspects of culture. So if you have a cultural phenomenon, like we eat this way, like in this culture, we eat this way. If you don't eat this way, you're a foreigner. And because there's like an inbuilt, evolutionary psychology thing to like, we want to be with our people and not those people, the foreigners. If you show up and you eat something different than what people are used to in their culture, they like reject you. This is, so many the history of diets can really be explained in this way. Like kosher is a good example, halal is a good example. They're ways of like, increasing like sort of cultural solidarity, or like in whatchamacallit, when Christianity was spreading to Northern Europe, Northern Europeans used to eat horses. and that was like they would sacrifice horses in sort of pagan rituals. It was like a part of their culture. But the church wanted to stop the animal sacrifices and like the pagan rituals, and so they made like horse meat, like you couldn't consume horse meat, it was legal. Like that's how they did it. And so like by attacking that fundamental aspect of culture, like what people decide to eat, like you're able to change their culture. So like no longer instead of being pagan, they become Christian. Um Not saying this is good or bad or whatever. The point is like culture and diets like go hand in hand. And so if you eat different things or eat weird things relative to the culture is going to fight back. And in the modern world, especially with mass media and newspapers and nonprofits and magazines and doctors and schools and universities and medical journals and all this stuff, culture can be bought. That's what marketing is. You're buying people to adopt your view of things, your culture. Like that's all that marketing is. You're spending dollars to change culture. And so seed oil is being very profitable on a large scale, of course, because seed oils, for context, are $100 billion market annually. Like $100 billion of seed oils are bought and sold in the U.S. Um, that's a very profitable thing. So there's a lot of money. The people who do seed oils have a lot of money, so they're able to like buy culture effectively. That's really what's going on.
So anybody who is really, really into like holistic health and wellness, like, someone like you obviously know a lot more about this stuff than I do, but I appreciate you coming on and just, really enlightening me and enlightening everybody listening. But there's always a why behind that, right? Like everybody nobody really is just like ultimately becomes fascinated with kind of stuff. I mean, maybe they do, but most people who become like very engulfed in the holistic health and wellness culture have some sort of story as to how they got there. So I'd love for you to kind of share your story about how this like obsession came to be for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I learned this like the first health conference that I ever went to. I didn't know what to expect. I had been sort of studying nutrition and like cooking for myself for a few years at this point, like reading books and doing all this stuff. And I just like showed up at some conference. And the thing that really stood out to me was how sick everyone there was. Like they had problems. Like, I have health problems. Maybe you have health problems. Like, oh, I have a little bit of bloating or I had a pimple the other day or something. These people, many of them had serious, serious problems. Um, and the reason why they were there is because their problems drove them to like the severity of their problems drove them to such great lengths to try to find a solution. And I think that's just like a generally true thing. People don't look for solutions to problems they don't have. So that's why you find people in holistic health who really like are unhealthy. And because they're so unhealthy, they go to doctors, they do this, they do that, nothing works. It drives them crazy. They get frustrated. And the people who are more driven to solve their problems, they find out all this stuff. I think there's, over the past, one of the things that's changed, I think like 10 years ago, it was very niche to be this into health. Nowadays, it's much more common. And I think part of the explanation for that is people just like got so unhealthy that more and more people have this problem that then is driving them to find a solution. In my case, I, as a kid, was always like pretty sick. Like I was never hospitalized for extended periods of time or nothing too severe. But like in eighth grade, I got the swine flu, and then a week later, I got the normal flu. I could never be more than 10 feet from box tissues, especially outside, because I was always congested, and I had like digestive issues. I couldn't eat gluten. Like I had a gluten sensitivity. My mom figured this out when I was 5 years old, so I'd always had like a sensitivity to food, and I had various like health issues. And I figured out when I was living in Belgium, as we mentioned, the French fries. This is how I kind of find out about tallow frying 10 years ago, 9 years ago. I did an internship after my freshman year of college at like a neuroscience lab there. And because they don't have dining halls, like I had to cook for myself. I couldn't go out to eat every day because like, the stipend for an intern at a lab is not very high. So I had to cook for myself. And in doing that for the first time, I was able to see the relationship between what I put in my body and how I felt afterward. So I noticed that if I ate certain things, I'd feel certain ways. So then I was like, wait, maybe, I can fix my health problems if I eat healthy. So I did more research, like stumbled upon the paleo diet. I started doing it. And then like the congestion that I had since I was a kid, like sort of went away. And I was like, oh, wow. Like if I can cure my congestion with like food, what else can I do? And that then set me down, this 10-year long rabbit hole, because it's just like, I think that if you're a sort of sick person, um, or whatever problem you have, whether it's like if you're poor, you don't have any money, or you're sick, you don't have health, whatever it is. People in that situation often tend to think that their situation is unchangeable. Like, oh, this is my fate. I'm just poor. I'm just fat. I'm just sick. It is the way it is. Like, sucks. And then, they'll be depressed or they may resent people who don't have those problems or whatever. And it's like, that's a common reaction or response to that situation. But some other people are like, wait, I have this problem. Let me fix it. And then there's this moment where you realize that your problem is fixable. And then you understand that you like have a lot of control over your own destiny. It's very empowering, like in like a legitimate sense of that word. Like you're empowered to change your future. You don't have to just like accept your fate, basically. So that's what happened to me with like health and food. I was like, oh, I have the power to fix this. I'm gonna like do as much of this as I can. And so that's what I ended up doing for the next like 10 years. And then I would, I did all the trends you can think of in the intervening time. I did all the sprouted seeds, the sprouted nuts, the sprouted grains. I was like sprouting quinoa in my college dorm with like little jars hanging at a 45-degree angle so the water could drain. I was brewing kombucha and like having girls over for kombucha cocktails. That was like my little gimmick. I had like, 10 different like gallon jars like with different brews going.
Did
I
it work?
make
Were the chicks digging it?
Yeah, I mean it attracts a certain audience.
There you go.
But yeah, no, it was a good strategy. Maybe a little. That's probably a 2018 era strategy, but it worked for what it was. I made sourdough bread. I hopped on that trend like in 2018. I would like come home at like 1 a.m. on a Saturday and like knead dough so that I could like make the bread on Sunday morning because like making bread takes like 48 hours. Um, I did keto, I did carnivore, all of all of these things basically. And so as I just like learned more and more about it and experimented on myself, I came to have better intuition about what I should eat and like, continued to get healthier to the point where I think I ultimately realized, and I'm not saying I can't learn anything else, but I think I personally, as well as a lot of people in the alternative health space, if you will, have sort of settled in on approximately what the ideal diet is, which is like you just eat real food. None of this fake BS. Obviously, no processed food, like in the conventional, like Walmart sense of it, but also none of this like fake health alternative processed food, like the cardboard, kale, chia seed type health foods that are just as processed and just as unnatural to our diet as like the Frito Lays and Doritos, although they may sound more natural. I think the ultimate understanding for me and what seems to work best for the most people in general is like, no, we just eat real food. Tallow fried potatoes, that's a real food. That's been around for hundreds of years. Sourdough bread, thousands of years. Steak and, steak, millions of years, basically. Well, maybe not, maybe hundreds of thousands of years. But you get the picture. Honey, fruit, wild fruit, organic berries, like actual food items. And so that's why I think, like, we talk about MASA Chips, for example, it's very distinct from like what people think of as health foods because it's just actual food. It's not like it's not like protein chips. It doesn't have like protein powder or like chia seeds or it's like high nutrient this or whatever. It's like, it's just actual tortilla chips the way they should be made, the way they would have been made in like a more, sane time in history. And that's it. And they're amazing. They taste great and they're healthier than any of these like sort of concoctions that you could come up with.
So why'd you decide to make a chip versus, any other sort of health food?
Yeah. Well, I think selfish reasons. Honestly, like so tortilla chips were the last seed oil containing food that I like willingly and knowingly ate. I had known about seed oils for probably like 6 months, but I was still eating tortilla chips because at the time I lived by myself. I did not. I'm engaged, so now I don't cook for myself anymore. But at the time I lived by myself, cooked for myself, trying to do my work or school or whatever it was. And so tortilla chips are just such a useful food. Corn is very digestible. It's a great carb. It's one of the more digestible carbs. Like there's honestly, carbs are hard. There's not a ton of like universally like healthy carbs. So corn, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, is like one of the better ones when it's prepared the right way, which maybe we can talk about.
Yeah, I was
Um,
gonna say because isn't like corn? I thought it like wasn't
yeah,
some forms of corn like the human body can't digest it.
yeah. I'll get to that in a sec.
Okay.
For sure. So yeah, I would eat corn chips with cheese, guacamole, salsa, meat, like nachos for lunch. Like that's so convenient, right? Like if I didn't have that I'd have to like roast potatoes in the oven or like bake bread, like, and God knows that takes 48 hours, as I already mentioned. So and like rice for me, I don't digest rice well personally, most of the time. So I wasn't doing rice. Quinoa, I'm not South American, so it's like, again, why? Like I'm the first person in my entire lineage to like ever see a quinoa. It's like kind of crazy. I'm not saying quinoa's not delicious, it is, but it's like it doesn't really make sense for me to be eating that. So corn chips were like the last thing I gave up because they're just a super convenient and like delicious part of like my diet. So versatile. And but at some point I was like, I have to stop doing this because Cheetos are just so bad. And then I gave them up and there was no alternative. So, there's about 8 months of my life that was like corn chip free. Maybe no, about a year of my life that was like corn chip free. And it was, a very bleak 8 months. I mean, yeah, maybe I'm exaggerating, but like, no, it's very helpful. So when the opportunity came to do this, I mean, basically the story is like we were in Miami with, my now co-founder and a few other friends from college. And like my co-founder was like eating like takeout Uber Eats like tacos from some taco shop in Miami and was like sitting at him watching him stuff his face with seed oil chips. And it's like, dude, what are you doing? And then the age-old question of like, well, these are delicious and screw you. I'm gonna like enjoy my life. And instead, I'm not gonna be healthy and miserable like you. And like, well, that's not real. That's not true because I eat delicious food. I could eat corn chips. I just don't because they're hard to make. And I don't have any available because all the ones are crap. But like there's nothing against corn chips. And then, that was the conversation that prompted like making a corn chip. And then, the rest of the story, as I already mentioned. But yeah, so honestly, I just wanted corn chips. I like them. That's why it exists, is the
Okay.
punchline there. Um,
Okay.
but, but yeah, the corn, that's a good point. Okay, so corn, food is complicated, right? Like humans have this funny thing where like if you say a word, people think everything that has that word is the same thing. So if I say corn, all the different things that could be corn, whether it's blue corn or yellow corn or organic corn or pesticide corn or corn from Mexico or corn from America or corn prepared in tortillas or corn on the cob or whatever. It's all the same in your head because you have the word corn. But like as I just alluded to, there's a ton of variation within that category of things called corn. Um, so the variety of the plant, whether it's GMO'd or not, that's something to keep in mind. And this could be like the blue corn or yellow corn thing too. Whether they use pesticides, organic or not, most corn in the US is both a GMO'd strain and it's high in it's farmed with a lot of pesticides, which makes it like doubly toxic. And the other thing too is like how is it prepared? So we talk about sourdough bread as a good example. Like you don't just eat wheat, right? Don't just eat wheat or like rice. You don't just eat rice. You have to boil rice, and ideally you would soak it and stir it for like 8 to 10 hours before boiling it, and then you eat it. You don't just eat wheat. You grind it up into flour, ferment it with sourdough, yeast, and bacteria, act on it slowly, and do all sorts of enzymatic reactions over 12 hours or whatever, and then you cook it, you bake it. You don't just eat corn either. Like Americans eat corn on the cob, but that's like not how you eat corn. The traditional way of preparing it amongst the cultures that like survived on corn is you have to do this thing called nixtamalization, which means you like boil it with like limestone, crushed up limestone, calcium hydroxide, and that makes it way more digestible. It gets rid of certain anti-nutrients. It increases the bioavailability of like vitamin B3, for example. It gets rid of mycotoxins and the resulting product like, will both taste better and is way more digestible. And that's how you actually make a tortilla. You don't just grind up corn and make it tortilla. You have to do this nixtamalization thing that the Aztecs invented. So yeah, if you get all those right, it's organic, it's not GMO, and you nixtamalize it, then corn is great. It's a great source of carbohydrates. But if you don't do those things, then yeah, corn would be sus, and I would avoid it.
So where do you source your corn or tortillas from?
The corn is there's a bunch of like a sort of co-op of like organic corn farmers in New England that does the corn and they do a great job. So yeah, and then nixtamalization happens with like natural limestone, not like test tube calcium hydroxide and filtered water. So yeah, I mean it's I think as we get bigger and as we grow, it's gonna be an interesting and very pertinent challenge to like figure out how to make sure that we can continue to do all that stuff at scale, which theoretically I have no doubts about. It's just like a question of money, at what time can we buy this equipment and do all these things? And like, if you have to truck corn around the country, that's expensive. And now do we have to have multiple factories and blah, blah, blah. So there's an operational headache to doing it. But theoretically, it's like, it's great.
So for somebody listening, they may say, okay, yeah, Steven, like, sure, like this all sounds great, but eating healthy is expensive. And,
Yeah.
there's like the whole, I mean, you and it sounds like you and I have both been grateful to grow up in, households where we're able to like,
Yeah, for sure.
now afford that. And even when I was a kid, right? Like I never had anything organic until I was probably almost in college, like my family, we just didn't know,
Yeah.
pinching pennies together, just trying to eat, quote unquote healthy, like the best we can, because as we know, there are a lot of people out there where money is not like, they don't
Yeah.
have the money to be spending all that. So, what is your kind of solution or advice to somebody who's
Yeah.
they can't, maybe they don't have the time to go to the local farms and buy the
Yeah.
pasture-raised eggs and, 100% grass-fed beef and like all these things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. There's a few things that I could say to that. First is like, you either have time or you have money. Like you spend a lot of time working, so you make money, but you have no time. So for those people, like, and I think this parallels sort of my journey. Like when I was in college, I had no money, I had a lot of time. So guess what? I learned to make sourdough bread. It's like basically free if you ignore the cost of my labor, which is free because I'm in college and I have no money. I have no job. So I'll make, bread for 48 hours or whatever. But since I graduated college and I made money, I had no time. And so I stopped making bread. And then wherever I go, if I'm lucky enough to have a bakery that makes bread the way that I would make it, then I can buy it. And so nowadays, like we go to a bakery that's like amazing and they basically do the same things that I would do if I were making it myself. Um, and it's expensive. People be like, it's like $12 for a loaf of bread. Like I can buy bread at the store for like two or what. I don't even know what bread costs at the store. I'm not a customer of store-bought bread. Um, but like I'm very happy to pay it because then I don't have to do it. I don't have to spend the time. So that's one thing to keep in mind is like same thing with MASA chips. Like, yes, they're expensive. If you have free time and you don't have money, go make them yourself. Like go make corn chips yourself. Go get some tallow. Like do it. Like have fun. Like it's time consuming, but it's not impossible. Like go ahead. Um, so that's one thing, like money versus time. The other thing is that like, yes, healthy food is expensive, but like being sick is also very expensive. Uh, the average American has like a $13,000 a year medical bill. Like that's what you spend on medical expenses, $13,000 like a year. I mean, I don't go to the doctor. Like, granted, I'm still young. I'm like 28, but I know plenty of my friends or people who are similar age that spend way more time in doctors and on medicines and all this crap than I do. Like, that's like if you don't go to doctors, that basically if you're the average person, you have 13,000 extra dollars a year to spend on food. That's 1,000 extra dollars per month. Like, you have any idea what you can do like for on your diet with like 1,000 extra dollars per month? Like insane. Um, So the other thing too is that like I wrote a whole Substack article about like doing this on a budget. Like it's true that yes, you're going to spend more money on good food. But like, at what like there's, what costs are associated. Like, yes, you will be healthier, you will have less medical bills, but at the same time, you'll feel better. And so your capacity to make money will increase. Most people who are probably listening to this in some way or another make money from their brain, whether they do marketing or finance or sales or whatever. It's like your brain is required to like make you money. If your brain is healthy and you have energy, you work more, you make more money, you do better, right? Pays for itself. Um, so that's another thing to keep in mind. And then I think the last thing to talk about is like if you really want to get creative with it, you can save a ton of money. It's like you basically trade money for convenience. So like if you bought half a cow from like a grass-fed rancher, you'd be basically paying like $4 to $6 a pound for like a half a cow. Like that's as cheap as like conventional meat in a lot of places for like high quality beef. But you have to like find a farmer and like go buy half a cow at once. So it's like you pay this premium for convenience. Oh, and then the last thing to say too is also priorities, right? Like, okay, healthy food is expensive, but it's expensive going out to the bar and drinking, going out to restaurants. Like as high quality as the food that we get, it's still every meal I eat is still like half the price or less of like even like a moderate restaurant in like, a city for like a meal or something. So yeah, I mean, if you can't have your cake and eat it too, is more or less what I'm trying to say. If you want to spend your money and going out and drinking and going out to restaurants and like doing the types of things that people spend their money on, like go ahead, that's fine. But like know that that's taking away from your budget of being healthy. So it's up to you, the individual, to choose. And yeah, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
It's funny. I put on my Instagram story the other day. I had 6 pasture raised eggs with like half an avocado and some Primal Kitchen buff sauce.
Yeah.
And I forget if I either had like a glass of raw milk or just like some like uncured turkey bacon on the side. And I like calculated it and it came out to like a little like 520 something for
Wow.
the meal.
That's
And
crazy.
like very nutrient dense.
Yeah.
I'm full for the next, 4 or 5 hours, and it's fantastic. It tastes delicious, and I have it every single day.
Yeah.
Versus even if you go out to eat and a kale salad with with pesticide ridden strawberries and almonds cost
Yeah.
$22,
Yeah,
right?
where the real L is, the real L is if you go out and buy this fake healthy food. That's the real, like, if you're buying a kale smoothie, because you're gonna spend a ton
Yeah.
of money and you're not even gonna get your money's worth.
There was dude, one of my favorite articles in your Substack, and I'd love for you to touch on it a little bit, is the 7 quote unquote healthy foods
Yeah,
that aren't actually healthy. So I'd love for you to just kind of dive into that one a little bit.
sure. Yeah, let me pull this up so I can just figure out what those 7 are. But yeah, if you like, there's a lot of people out there who will market like in clever ways to like get you to spend money on things that like are unnecessary. Like supplements are also a pretty decent example. Like there are people who have a huge supplement budget, like it's hundreds of dollars a month on supplements, and they don't even like get the right food. So it's like once again, priorities. Like you really have to like do an audit of like what you're buying. Um and make sure that you choose the right things to spend your money on. I mean, dude, $5 for that breakfast, like that's the price of like an egg McMuffin or something, right? Like that's insane.
You get a green juice is $11 for like
Yeah.
120 calories
Yeah.
and just poison.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not as expensive as people think because they just see it as like I'm gonna keep doing everything that I'm already doing and just spend more money on like groceries. But it's like no, like you have to shift around like what you're doing and how your approach to food in general. Um, but yeah, I think yeah, that's probably right. I mean, also at the same time, like you don't need to eat like MASA chips, like if that's a luxury for you, then don't eat it all the time. Like you don't need corn chips. Like I'm not saying you need to eat that stuff. Like yes, you need to eat like pasture raised like ground beef. Like sure. You basically need to eat like eggs of some kind. That's really it. Like everything else is extra. Whether you get like white rice by the 20-pound bag or something and like whatever, extra virgin olive oil from Italy or like Kerrygold butter. Like that's a diet right there. Like, and then you're gonna be healthy, and then you can make more money so you can buy better food. But like, yeah, you don't need to go for luxury stuff. So, all right, the 7 things that are not actually healthy. Flax and chia seeds. That's a fun one. I mean, it's funny, a lot of these things also taste bad at the same time. And like that should be your clue. Like health foods should taste good. Like our taste buds adapted to like seek out like nutrients. So like high nutrient content food tastes good to us. Um, Flax and chia seeds are full of PUFAs that are even worse than normal seed oils. Because
What's a PUFA? Can you
okay,
explain
yeah.
that real quick?
So unsaturated fats. We already talked about this. The
Yep.
technical term
Oh
is
yeah.
polyunsaturated fats,
Right.
polyunsaturated fatty acid. So that's what's in seed oils, in seeds in general. So PUFAs are the thing to avoid. And flax and chia seeds are even higher PUFA content than like normal seeds, just because like that's how they are. So yeah, super inflammatory. Uh, Flaxseed oil. God, I forget about this one. It's such a dude. So Michelangelo, the Mona Lisa, painters, Da Vinci, all these people. Oil-based paint is what they use. Like good artists from the Renaissance use oil-based paint. What oil, you might ask? Well, flaxseed oil. Literally, paint is made of flaxseed oil. Why? Because it's so like it dries in air. Basically, you expose it to oxygen and it hardens into like a plastic type material. So when you eat it, Guess what's in your body? Oxygen everywhere. Everywhere is oxygen. So like these types of oils, like the very unsaturated oils, like in flax and chia seeds and also in fish oil, like that's the reason why we have cellulite. That's the reason why your innards are being turned to plastic. Like because they're so unsaturated that oxygen exposure will turn them into plastic. So yeah, don't eat those things. They also like turn into this like sort of pudding in your intestines to like clog everything up. And like some people claim that's good, but that's like that's obviously ridiculous. You don't want hardened plasticky pudding in your intestines. Green juice is another bad one because I mean going back to this idea of extraction, like if you would eat a certain amount of kale and then you get full, like cool because there's fiber, because all this water, all this other stuff. You can only eat so much of it before you have to like clock out. When you juice something, you're able to concentrate what's in it to an unnatural extent, such that when you eat the juice, you're eating way more of that stuff than you ever would have eaten it if you're eating the natural whole food version of the food. So, green juice is a good example because these veggies like kale and spinach, they have calcium oxalate, it's just among many sort of anti-nutrients, which, in reasonable quantities, you'd be able to digest and process. But in the quantities where you're concentrating them because you extracted it in juice form, you get way too much of it. So drinking green juice, yeah, have fun with your kidney stones. Um, Beans and lentils are another one. So, my God, this is so funny. I'm just reading this again. It's like, yeah, so I don't know if people are older listening to this, like in the early 2000s, there was this like bioterrorism scare like called ricin. Ricin was like this powdered poison thing that like people would put in the mail and you'd open the letter and you'd breathe this in and then it would like kill you. Um, that's Wait, maybe I'm confusing it with anthrax. Regardless, ricin is I might be confusing that with anthrax. Anyway, ricin is a deadly biotoxin. It's been used as like a poison to kill people. But yeah, it comes from beans. It's a lectin. Beans are super high in lectins, which are anti-nutrients that are toxic. Beans are also super high in phytoestrogens, which are also toxic. Um, and they, the only redeeming quality is because they have like protein. The plant protein is like super low quality, so you don't absorb it, you don't use it, so it's like a complete waste of time. um Alternative milks also, uh there's a trend here on this list where it's like things that are fake, right? Milk is great. When you make alternative milk, you have to make some ungodly processed concoction. You have to squeeze almonds, and then like the oat milk, for example, they add in canola oil. They add in a seed oil because like milk has fat, so they need to like add in a fat to replace the fat that would be in milk. But the problem is oil and water don't mix. So like not only you have this oil, it's like poisonous, you have to mix the two. And so then you have to add these things called lecithins, which like allow oil and water to mix. It's like another chemical. Like you've seen sunflower lecithin, soybean lecithin. And yeah, supernatural, right? Mixing oil and water. That sounds like something I want to put in my body. Gluten-free bread, same thing. It's like you're condensing and concentrating all these nuts and like the like nut flours and stuff that you would not eat in those quantities naturally, but because they're compressed into this sort of bread thing, you eat a lot of it. So they're super calorie dense. Nuts and seeds are high in PUFAs, and also a ton of anti-nutrients. Um, Same thing is true with like these keto snacks. It's like these alternative snacks. It's like, okay, it has no sugar, it has no wheat, it has no carbs. So what does it have? It has fake things. It has allulose, which is like a not real food that comes from like one plant in China that makes all the world's allulose. And it's like it tastes sweet, but you can't digest it, so it has no caloric value. And it's like it requires only this one factory in China. Like you can't just go out and pick allulose at the field, you know. Um, and then you have the same things with all these sort of like concentrated versions of like other foods that you would never eat in that way, the nut powders and all this stuff. But yeah, the keto snacks are super sus because the fake sweeteners. So yeah, I mean, you just have to look at the labels of these alternative things and you quickly realize that like they're way, way more complex and way more industrial than the actual natural version of that thing.
So the alternative milks, 'cause I was on the train for a while too of the almond milks, the oat milks,
Mhm.
and also it's just like hilarious. Like if raw milk, which I now only drink, has no ingredients. It's like it's just
There's no ingredients.
it's just raw milk. Whereas if you look at the the store brand almond milk, it's got carrageenan, it's got all these other
Xanthan gum.
additives. Yeah, xanthan gum, all this other crap. Like
Yeah.
why is that such like a fad, and why do you go to every you know, playa bowls or like, you know,
Yeah.
any other place where you get like these acai bowls and things like that or smoothies?
Yeah.
Why is that what what's the deal with almond milk? Why?
Yeah. So the answer I'll give is not just for almond milk, and maybe you encountered this article also on my Substack. It's processed foods make money. So like people don't come up with the idea that like, hey, this processed food is healthy and I want to make people healthier. So I'm gonna go sell it and do it. Like that may be what they say. But the business reason behind why these things exist is that when you have something that's processed and packaged and it's got a label and a brand, that's where you make the money. Because um, food is only, the way business works, right? If you sell $1,000 of something, maybe your costs to make that thing are $500, and so you get to pocket the other $500. Even if you're very profitable and you have a high profit margin, say you sell a thing for $1,000 and you pocket 700 of those dollars, you still only have 700 of those dollars, even though it's very profitable, 70% profit margins. But if you sell $1 billion worth of a thing, and even if you only profit 30% profit margin, which is terrible, like as far as businesses are concerned, what did you make? 30% of $1 billion is $300 million. So $300 million versus $700, it doesn't matter like the per unit profitability of something. What matters is how much overall you can physically possibly sell. And so the reason why we have a push toward processed food is because the total amount of processed food you can sell will always be greater than the total amount of non-processed food you can sell. For the simple reason that like actual food requires actual farmers on actual land to make it. And you can only do so much if you're a farmer. Maybe you have 1,000 acres, 2,000 acres, right? How much land, if you're a farmer, can you physically like get on your golf cart or your horse and ride around and like actually supervise? Not very much, maybe a few thousand acres. But if you sell processed food that's like detached from the farm, you could have a factory that's pumping out, like literally effectively infinite quantities of food. So there's a strong bias in the food industry to want to sell things that can come from a factory. Um, and things that come from a factory are processed food. And so that's why they want to sell processed food. Like think of the milk brands, like that you could like every region, every state, every county has like different milk on the shelf, right? That means you have say 10,000 milk farms or milk producers each sharing in the giant milk industry. What about oat milk? There's only one brand. So if the oat milk industry is even like a tenth of the size of the normal milk industry, because it's only one brand, you make all that money for the entire industry. So the total size, the total volume of things you can sell is higher. Like Oatly is the same in California as is New Jersey, but there's like not a single milk brand where you can buy in New Jersey, you can also buy in California. So I think that's the important thing to understand why processed food is attractive from like a business perspective to like corporations. Like this is why investors give money to processed food. This is why Beyond Meat goes to raise, $1 billion, even though it fails and stock is crashing and no one wants to buy it. But they raised $1 billion. Why? Because if they succeed, Beyond Meat will be in every store in America. Whereas if a beef farmer succeeds, like success looks like, oh, I sell to like all the grocery stores in like a 50-mile radius from my farm. Like that's what success looks like, or maybe 100 miles, whatever. So because of the what success is, if you actually win, the stakes are a lot higher, the payoff is much larger, and so you get a lot more money injected into the sort of processed food industry. Um, so in a nutshell, the processed milks are just one example of this. The synthetic sugars are the same thing. You can honey, right? How much honey can you make from one, beekeeper? Like not much, right? Like there's a different honey in like every single farmer's market in the country. But if you make like an allulose, which is like from one factory in China and they can produce indefinitely large quantities of it, you can put your allulose on shelves in every single store in the country. And it's the same allulose. So I think that's what it really comes down to. Nut milks are just a pretty obvious example, but like they have a lot of marketing dollars. There's a lot at stake. So they're willing to spend the money on marketing to become successful so that they can like monopolize the whole thing. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely makes sense. And for me, I always thought that I was lactose intolerant
Yeah.
because, or at least over the past couple of years, I thought I was lactose intolerant because I was having, indigestion problems, gut health issues, brain fog, you name it. I was having those kind of issues. So I, not putting two and two together, that I was eating a ton of grains, processed
Yeah.
grains. I was eating a ton of gluten, which now taking gluten out of the diet and adding raw dairy into the diet, I feel great. Feel the
Yeah.
best I've ever felt in a very long time. So,
Yeah.
why? How do we break this kind of stigma of like
Yeah.
everybody's lactose intolerant and like why should people start having like
Yeah.
raw dairy over normal dairy?
So yeah, this is a good example of like a false dichotomy in food. So like food, as people are aware of it, conventional food is bad. It makes everyone's obese, everyone's fat because of sort of conventional processed packaged diet that Americans have. So in response to that, it's very easy to say, okay, everything we eat is bad. Let's go the exact opposite way. So milk is bad, bread is bad. Let's throw it all out and replace it with something completely different. But then you run into the problems that we talked about earlier. Now you also have you have a processed thing. It looks very different. It has very different ingredients, but it's still processed and unnatural. The proper solution here is the middle ground where you took the thing that was bad, the processed food that everyone's used to, and just get rid of the bad parts. Make it good. You know, milk, for example, you go to the grocery store. So many problems with milk. First of all, it starts with what the cows, not even the cows, it's what the cows are fed. They're fed grains, which even if like grain like soy and corn were natural to the cow's diet, the soy and corn that they are fed are like GMO pesticide filled like soy and corn. So even if they did eat that naturally, it's still not healthy because like the crappy soy and corn. And the cows have their hormones, they're in warehouses, all this crap. So right off the bat, you have a sick animal. And then that's why you get the antibiotics because the cow's sick. So you get the antibiotics to keep it healthy. Absolute nightmare. The milk itself it's a disaster. Then you take this milk, and then you pasteurize it because the cow is sick. It's got like bacteria infested udders, and now the milk has bacteria in it. So then you pasteurize it, so you heat it to kill the bacteria. But then you also kill all the beneficial enzymes and like certain nutrients get denatured. Like vitamin C is in raw milk, but it's not in pasteurized milk. Um, so then you got rid of all those enzymes and the bacteria that also help you digest lactose. People are like lactose intolerant. Sure. Like lactose tolerance happens in your gut. The bacteria do the digestion of the lactose for you. Like they're called lactic acid bacteria. They use lactase to digest lactose and they produce lactic acid, whatever. Um, so then after they do all this crap to it, then they add additives. So if you go to the milk section, look at the labels: synthetic vitamin A, synthetic vitamin D, DHA, other additives. They claim these are like, vitamins, but milk already should have the vitamins in it. You don't need to add vitamins. And synthetic vitamins are often toxic and, they cause all sorts of digestive and other problems. So then people drink milk and they feel bad and they're like, "Oh, I'm lactose intolerant." And it's like, "Are you lactose intolerant or are you just like crappy milk intolerant, Are you synthetic vitamin additive intolerant?" But people are unable to tell the difference, right? Because going back to what I said before about, words, like it's called milk. So like, "Oh, I couldn't eat that milk, so therefore I can't eat all milk." Um, and then, they are like, "Okay, I can't eat milk, so what else you got for me?" Almond milk, oat milk, whatever, and then that's how they end up in that rabbit hole. So the only way to fix this is by giving people the actual quality version of the thing. Same thing with corn chips. "Oh, I feel terrible after I eat corn chips. So what am I gonna do? Throw out the corn, throw out the oils, throw out the seasonings, whatever, and replace it with this like cardboard, you know, Frankenstein conglomeration." But like, no, just have a corn chip. Do you feel bad eating corn chips or do you feel bad eating bad corn chips? Eat good corn chips and you'll feel bad. I eat MASA chips every day for lunch. I feel great, that kind of thing. If I ate seed oil Tostito chips, I'd feel terrible. So, the real solution is to present people with the actual proper version of the food and not like the fake alternative. And so I think it's like, our job is like the influencers of the educators of the world to like teach people about this. That's one piece. But the other piece is like you have to actually get it to the point where those foods are available. I can tell people to drink raw milk until I'm blue in the face, but if there's nowhere for them to get raw milk, they're not going to drink raw milk, obviously. I can tell people to eat tallow fried corn chips until I'm blue in the face, but unless there's tallow fried corn chips they can go buy, they're not going to eat them because no one's going to make that themselves. So we have to actually make it available, and then that's where we run into the problem of like the quality piece, because yes, it's expensive, it's harder to make all these things, and so then not only like that poses an additional barrier to like making it available. But that's, so we basically need two. We basically need people, educating, telling people, hey, this is what is right, this is what we have to do, and then you need other people who are making this stuff accessible and available. And it's fighting upstream because we already talked about the economics of like processed foods and like that whole industry. So if you're trying to make real things, you're fighting upstream because MASA chips cost 15 times more than Doritos, like per ounce. Like they're expensive. Like, and they're not that way because I am a grifter and I want to make a ton of money. I like basically make no money. I used to make way more money working at my tech job than I do now. And we sell quite a lot of chips. Um, the the reason why they're expensive is because ingredients are expensive, labor is expensive, and all these other things. Like being small is expensive. For example, Frito-Lay on the shelf at grocery stores. If you buy $10 worth of Frito-Lay chips, whatever, $8 of that goes to Frito-Lay. But if you were to buy $10 of MASA chips, $5 of that goes to me. And the reason is because Frito-Lay is so big, they have special deals with the grocery stores to like get a higher percentage of, the money that the customer spends at the register back to Frito-Lay. And, that's what they can do. They're so big. They're Frito-Lay. I can't do that. So like Frito-Lay, even if we charged the same amount for the same product, Frito-Lay would make more money than I would just because I'm small. Things like that make it very difficult. And it's like the reason why these things are expensive and why it's hard and, it's not that available. But, we're working on it. We're going to have more products. Other people should do the same. And that's, that in combination with the whole education piece is like, I think how we can ultimately fix it.
As we start to wrap this thing up here, I just dude, this is fascinating to me, and I'm looking forward to reading many more Substack articles, and there's a multitude of ways we could have talked about fragrances and
Oh yeah.
clothing and sunscreen and all that, but that's for another podcast episode. But I'm curious, what does a day in the life of the tan man look like? What do you eat? What is your what's your morning routine? How do you structure your days? Because I know you were a systems engineer by trade, so systemizing your days to kind
Yeah.
of like optimize your health, I'm sure is a part of your life. So curious, what does a day in the life of the tan man look like?
That's a funny question. No one's ever asked me that. Yeah, I was a software engineer, so we're a bit less organized, I would say, than
Okay.
the systems engineer. I think the funny thing about it is like as a software engineer, you basically get paid to be lazy. Like that's by
Interesting.
design. Because like what you're doing as a programmer, you're telling the computer to like, hey, go do this task. But your job as a programmer is to get it to do that task as efficiently as possible. Because everything it's got to do is got to like calculate numbers, move electrons around in the CPU and whatever, and all that costs energy and time. So your job as a programmer is to get it to do that thing with the least amount of energy and the least amount of time possible. So like, and that's what lazy people do, right? They figure out the easiest way to do something. So it's like smart people who are lazy, like that's who software engineers are, which I just find hilarious. Um, so yeah, I would say, okay, what do I eat in a day? Yeah, my routine is not as systematized as you might think. I wake up, my fiance wakes me up. I don't use an alarm, and I'm like basically a zombie for 30 minutes. Um, and I like go on my phone and look at socials and look at Shopify and answer urgent texts. Then we have breakfast. She makes usually like for example this morning we had eggs and sourdough toast and we had raw chocolate milk. She made it with, like, cocoa powder,
Oh,
and
wow.
we had organic it's strawberry season up in Jersey now, so we had, organic strawberries that she actually picked at a farm yesterday near us, um, and I think that's it for breakfast. Then today yeah, I guess let's just use today. Then I had to go to the factory because deal with some production issues because we make the chips ourselves still. Came back here, do a podcast, emails being checked in the middle of all this. a lot of scheduled phone calls during the day. I'll take like 30 minutes to eat lunch. Yesterday, for example, she made MASA nachos with like pasture raised ground beef from the farmer's market, um, arugula from the farm, salsa from the farm. There's a lot of good farms around here in New Jersey. So like basically 90% of what I eat is other than like olive oil and like MASA chips. Yeah, basically everything I eat that's not olive oil or MASA chips comes from like within 100 miles of here. So it's pretty cool. Um, so yeah, then we had masa nachos, usually some organic fruit, oranges or like mandarins, strawberry season. So I'm like loading up on strawberries. And then I'll go and do more work. I'll spend more time than I should on social media, answer more emails, tweak and monitor my Facebook ads, like talk to suppliers, look at metrics, like explore new marketing channels, make Instagram posts, write Substacks, make Twitter threads, edit photos, whatever. And then dinner will happen. And then usually, so like last night, for example, she made roasted potatoes and olive oil with grass-fed hamburgers with like cheese on top and I think we had asparagus and garlic. That was the vegetable. And then for dinner or for dessert, I might have more raw milk or some ice cream. We like making ice cream ourselves, but if we can't make it ourselves, it's gonna be like Alex ice cream. I like the Alex brand. It's like regeneratively farmed dairy, so like that's pretty cool. And then maybe some chocolate with the ice cream, delicious. So yeah, I'm not denying myself. I'll say that. That's the punchline here. And then after dinner is usually when I'll actually start working and like focusing on things that like I get too distracted during the day with like phone calls and texts and all these things. So it's just like whatever reason the vibe at night is like I can actually work and like focus on stuff. So then I'll do stuff that requires a bit more focus, like setting up some new tech like ad platform or like creating a bunch of ads for Facebook or answering a bunch of emails uninterrupted, um, writing oftentimes at night, and then yeah, I'll basically like do a little reading in my red light before I go to bed. I'll go to sleep. And that's it.
Okay, I got to touch on that too. Is red light better in the morning or in the evening? Because I just got some red light and I've been doing it in the morning.
So red light therapy is great in the morning.
Okay.
Like at night, I use red light as like ambient light.
Okay.
So like that will be my light bulb to read with, but I'm not like putting it on my body.
Gotcha.
That makes
Okay.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so you're not as much of like a, Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield biohacker in
No,
terms of that
no,
way.
no, I don't think so. I mean, okay, I missed like so I didn't work out this morning, but normally like 7 to 8 a.m. I'll work out. My personal trainer is like I talk to him over Zoom or WhatsApp, and we do it that way. So
Sure.
I have that, but no, I don't personally do the systematic approach. I think that doesn't work for me. It could work for some people. Um, I think like create like I don't know the scatterbrained creativity, like it just happens, is like the sort of way that I approach things. Um, I think the like the burdensome sort of routine and very systematic routine is like the type of thing that emerges and is a luxury for people who like don't actually have to work that hard. And I know people are gonna get mad at this, and I'm not saying they don't work hard, but like they've made it. Those guys, like they're good, right? They have staff to help them with video editing and doing all these things. They have all their shit down. Like they don't have to go out and like it's not like fight or die basically for them. And so they can afford to do all these things. And also there's a lot of like the sort of workout bros who have like an online course or two and they like have digital products and they make their decent money and they live in like San Diego and like surf all day and like, spend 5 hours working out. That's also not me either. Like running the business that I run is like, especially at the stage that we're at is like it's just a mess basically. Um and so and my life is sort of like, you know, in a similar sort of way because of just like the craziness that's going on. Um the listener may not, share that particular experience, and if so, then like more of a routine is great. That sounds cool, but for me it's like that's just not how it works. If I get a burst of like an idea, I have to go write it out. I got to go do something. Someone calls me, just got to happen. But if your life is like set up in a way that's like more chill, then you can surely benefit from some more of like a systematic routine. Definitely.
So amidst all the craziness, what about MASA, building MASA, and then it's under ancient crunch, so there's
Yeah.
obviously going to be more amazing products coming out there. But what about the whole process excites you the most?
I think okay, so the most fun thing is all the like the sort of art stuff. Brand art, brand design, branding, creating ads, creating marketing copy, um, like the photos, the videos, all the stuff on Instagram, like um that stuff to me is the most fun. Eating them, of course, is great. And then, developing recipes I think is fun too. Um and then there's just like the general sense of like conquering, like, oh, Moss is a new store. Oh, we're selling out in a new store. Like that's like all of that stuff is like it's like the more that we can expand this footprint of this product and future products in reality is great because to me that means that there's more people who are like going to be healthy. And I think this is important, not just, like it's important because health leads to a whole bunch of other better things in society. It's very easy, especially in these circles, to be like, "Oh, health is the end all be all." But, like, when people are healthy, everything works better. Like, society works better, people are less crazy, things are cleaner, more organized, more put together, people become more intelligent, more reserved, like, more competent, things function, things look good, people look good, like, people are not freaking out, suffering, whatever like, all the sort of things you hear about in the news, it's all terrible all the time. Like, a healthy society, meaning, like, a society made of biologically healthy individuals doesn't do any of that crap. So to me, that's where like the real victory is. By like allowing people to be healthy, you bring sanity back to the world. And it's very interesting. In Italian, like sane, sanity basically means health. Like they're the same word. In that's how you translate health in Italian. So I think that's very true. Like health and sanity go hand in hand. And I prefer to live in a world that's like that. Um, and so I think the more people that are touched by this way of eating, thinking, living, whatever, whether it's through the information from Tan Man or through the products from Ancient Crunch, the more the world comes to be like the sort of imagery that's all over my pages and stuff. Like that's a fake world, doesn't exist in real life, but we can get ourselves closer to that world. So that's really the exciting thing.
I love that, dude. I'm really excited to see the evolution of Masa, of Ancient Crunch, of the Tan Man, of the you and your fiance make some incredible collaborative posts. And yeah, dude, I'm really just a huge fan of all that you're doing, and it's very much needed. And I appreciate the work that you do. Before I ask you my final question here, I want to jump into the quick three with you, which is just three quick questions,
Okay.
little more fun. Um, so as a kid, I know that you mentioned you had some issues, some health issues, you couldn't do all of the other things, but what was your go-to cheat or no, I'm gonna redo this question. What is your go-to quote unquote cheat meal that would be typically unhealthy
Oh.
that you love to eat?
Well, I wouldn't do this now. But when I was a kid, it would be Cheez-Its. Love Cheez-Its. I would get like I would never was never allowed to eat this stuff because it's wheat and processed. My parents never got a ton of processed food, but when I go to sleepovers at my friend's house, I would pound the Cheez-Its. Um, just I love cheese and it's crunchy and it's salty. Cheeses are perfect, like taste wise for
Maybe
eight-year-olds.
maybe that'll be the next thing. Maybe it'll be
Maybe I
a
don't
healthy
know.
cheese with some
Can't
raw cheese and some Himalayan salt.
can't confirm nor deny.
I love it. If you could just drop everything and go anywhere tomorrow, where would it be?
That's a good question. You mean like on a travel, like for vacation or to like live?
Either or.
For vacation, I'd say like somewhere like in Greece, like yeah, somewhere in the Mediterranean, Greece, French Riviera. Take your pick.
There we go. I love that. Now, what is one book, podcast, or resource in general that has had a positive impact on you over the past year?
Oh, the past year. Ooh. Um. Oh boy. Trying to remember what I've read over the past year. Honestly, I have not consumed enough content over the past year to really be able to. Wait, no. Okay, there's a book. There's a marketing book. Okay, I remember. There's a marketing book called "The 22 Laws of Branding." Anyone who's trying to start a company, read that. That's all I'll say.
I'll add it to the list because I'm in that I'm
Okay.
in that boat as well. My last question for you is, this is the Pure Ambition podcast. So I like to ask all my guests, when you hear those two words together, as you see on this banner behind
Oh
me,
yeah.
pure ambition, what immediately comes to mind? What does that mean to you? And how does it apply to your daily life?
Pure ambition. To me, that means like you're going to do something noteworthy without being distracted by other things. So you're going to go accomplish something, create something, build a business, create a brand, whatever, change the world, so to speak, uh, with little regard to like other sort of normal things that might distract people. Like you're not going to bars or partying or whatever because you're building something. You have that focus. That's what I would say. And for me, I think that's right. I mean, I don't have like really a social life, and I don't even want one, honestly. Like people ask me to do stuff, and I'm like, oh, I'm good. Like I'm satisfied with like what I do on a day to day basis. Go for a little walk. You know, that's really it. Like people are like, I have friends that are like, hey, I want to go to Asia like in 6 months. Like, you want to come? And I'm like, nah, not really. No, I mean it would be cool, but it's just like not where I'm at. So yeah,
I love it. Well, I appreciate everything that you brought to the table today, literally.
nice.
This is unintentional pun there, but dude, this was great. We'll have to have you back on the podcast to chop it up down the line. But if anybody wants to
Sure.
check out more of your stuff, your Substack, MASA Chips, connect with you. Where are you hanging out at?
Sure. Really tan man on any of your social platforms, and you'll find my bio link on any of those so you can get to the Substack easily. And then MASA Chips is masachips.com, MASACHIPS.com.
I love it, Steven. Appreciate you, man, and keep striving to make the world a better place.
Thanks, Dom. It's been great.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode. I wanted to give you all a heads up too that I launched a free community on the Upspace app where you can join, ask me questions, connect with like-minded individuals, follow my 4-week running and strength training program that has some dedicated mobility sessions in there as well, so that we can all optimize our health and fitness together. So if you're interested, head over to the App Store, download the Upspace app, and join the Pure Ambition community today. Love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.